Hi there. Welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabriele Nicolet. I am a toddler whisperer, a speech therapist, and a parent coach. And today I have Amanda Levin with me. Amanda, welcome.
Thank you so much.
I'm excited for what we're going to talk about today because I do feel like it's an area that lots of people don't either know a lot about or understand. But before we do that, tell the good people a little bit about yourself and who you are.
Well, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Amanda Levin, as you mentioned. 2 years ago, I started a peer support group and social events club for moms called NeuroSpice Girls. Basically, when my son was diagnosed with autism, ADHD, and anxiety, it was both a completely overwhelming experience and the complete laundry list of to-dos once you get a diagnosis, and at the same time, extremely isolating because there was no one in my peer group going through the same experience. And while I have very dear friends who are extremely empathetic, you can only kind of go through all the acronyms and different services you might need to have them be able to support you in the right way. So I was looking to find moms who were having this similar experience and figured they were out there. Initially, I reached out to a few people, word of mouth, which started out with about 12 or 15 moms that I just knew locally. And since in the last 2 years, the group has really expanded to about just over 650 moms, ranging from, as high up as Baltimore to, Virginia in the suburbs, DC. And I've now really wanted to make this kind of a community and a movement, and building a lot of different programming and real-time support via Facebook and WhatsApp. So those moms, when there's a crisis or a medication shortage, there's a space for them to share and vent and get the support they need.
Yeah, you really are creating this community of folks who understand. They get it. Okay, so from that lens, and you're not an education professional, you're not a psychologist, you're not a therapist, you're a mom. Before we hit record, you mentioned a profile that I think is very common, actually, which is very gifted and also learning disabled. So like this split between what we would call like a scatter skill profile or like a spiky profile, where kiddos are really, really good at some things and also high masking. And so tell us a little bit about, like, when you're thinking about that profile, like how have you come across it? How have you, what is your experience there? And, make it as personal or as not as you want.
Sure. Well, first of all, I mean, this describes my child to a T. When he was first diagnosed with autism, in fact, people we knew in our community couldn't believe he had autism. And they kind of went through the typical tropes of, but he looks at me when he talks, or he's conversational, or he's social. And it was a bit confounding as far as like behavioral modification techniques that, allegedly work for autistic children and ADHD children. And all of them were just exploding in my face as a disaster. And my husband and I kept going back and saying, what are we not getting here? And so a friend of mine introduced me to the idea of what people know as pathological demand avoidance, which are children that don't necessarily meet all of the typical autistic criteria, maybe the social piece and others. And also have extremely high academic ability, but maybe some deficits that are challenging, and a lot of the behavior is at home. So often you can feel like the schools are completely gaslighting you because they'll say, well, he's a perfect angel here, or, we only really care about what's happening essentially between 9 and 3:30. So, you can tell me that they're having a meltdown, but if it's not really impactful to me, like, sorry, sucks for you. So I think when it comes to getting children's services, it's important to try to connect those behaviors to, well, there are clearly challenges at school, but they're keeping it together. And then at home in their safe space, they're falling apart. So, I think that's really the key in helping these children get what they clearly need. And it's very difficult.
Yeah. And for anybody who isn't familiar with the term masking, I'm just going to define it briefly here because I'm reasonably sure most people do. But masking involves suppressing or ignoring your own body's signals in order to look more neurotypical, in order to appear as though you are easily breezing through life the way that the other people that you're watching seem to be able to do. Now, whether or not that's actually happening is a different question. And it is true that all of us mask some of the time. But when we're talking about autistic kids in particular, they are in many ways being forced to mask. And they're doing it for survival. They're not doing it on purpose. It's not a choice necessarily. And so what that means is they're doing a lot of work in this particular example during the school day. And by the time they get home, they've got nothing left. And so then you see the meltdowns because you've reached capacity on the nervous system. The nervous system has been like, we've been doing this all day long. Now we're done.
Yeah, it's exhausting, but can be very confounding because, with this particular profile, something that you or I might not have a problem doing or considered to be a demand, like, saying, like, please put your shoes on the shoe rack, with a kid who's totally spent, that's like the trigger for a major explosion. So I think that's something that myself and my husband have really had to, like, remember, as you said, like, it's not purposeful jerky behavior, like really kind of thinking, like, where is this coming from, and trying to be a little more sympathetic and understanding.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you said about school kind of not caring, or it's not that they don't care. They care, and they have limited capacity, and they have a legal mandate that is this broad and not that broad. Fine. But in this particular example, what's interesting to me is the school day is an antecedent event that's causing a meltdown after school, right? And so when we start to think about it that way, now, can one go into the school and say, so listen, like, this 6 hours is one big setup, and can we make it be less of a setup, please?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why it's important to, look into supports like 504s and IEPs, which I'm no expert in other than going through the experience myself and being extremely frustrated by the lack of clarity of processes. And also just, I don't think I realized until being in this world how very subjective a lot of this is. I thought a lot of it was much more of a science than an art. And that has been one myth that has been blown out of the water for me.
That is such a good point, and it's something you did say before we hit record as well. Like, you'd think there was a roadmap or like a protocol, or that somebody has an answer here about what we're supposed to do. And you're absolutely correct, and I'm here to validate you that there isn't. Depending on what type of professional you see, they will be looking through their lens, and they will tell you one set of things. And if you go to a different professional, they will tell you potentially a completely different set of things. Sometimes those things overlap, and that's lovely when it does. But it doesn't always. And part of that is on us in the professions. I'm trained as a speech therapist. I have many friends who are occupational therapists, physical therapists. We are trained in a very narrow lens. And
Right.
we used to joke in grad school, like, speech therapy is from like kind of the neck up. Well, that's not true at all. We have to be aware of what's going on in the body. We have to be aware of how a kid is functioning emotionally and throughout their day. Like that, it all plays together. We're not talking about different parts here. We're talking about all the parts of a whole person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so with that, what have you kind of, how do I want to ask this question? As you're being, as you feel like you're being gaslit by the school, for example, what's been your process through that journey of like, oh, they actually don't know the answers? And then what's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is like it's incredibly frustrating, and it's surprising, like that it's not easier to find the answers. And I feel very privileged that I have time in my day to like devote to kind of doing this sort of research. There are a lot of parents who working jobs that like this is not an option for them, and it feels like information gatekeeping is a real challenge and somewhat related to just like your availability. And it's really unfair that I feel as a parent I have to sort of look into all the menu of options that could be available for me to ask for as support, which I think is completely the opposite of how it should be. I should be able to say, can you look at my child, see what's going on, and then tell me what's available. And I think, unfortunately, because of a variety of reasons, including budgetary and staffing issues, I think that's unfortunately the information is being held back, from people being aware.
Yeah. And I don't think any of that, the majority of that is not volitional. It's not on purpose. We're not
Oh
trying
yeah,
to
yeah,
deprive
100%,
people.
100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it does make it very hard when, as a parent, you don't want to waste anyone's time. And you're basically going up to the school and saying, like, there's an issue here and we want to deal with this. And so it can feel like you're going into battle, and it shouldn't have to be. It should be a very collaborative relationship. But, and I think literally every individual school is different. A lot of different school systems are different. But just, speaking to my personal experience, it feels like you kind of are having to get ready to like be a defense attorney, and like law is not my background. My husband's is, and he's very, not super confrontational, so it can be very challenging. And a lot of the moms in my group also face a lot of these issues as far as with these children that the sort of from the outside, it might look like an invisible disability. You can't obviously tell that there's something going on. So then the process with the school becomes that much harder exactly for that reason.
So if you're listening to this and you have a high masking, high performing, maybe with some learning disabilities kiddo who has difficulty with emotional regulation, has maybe trouble completing tasks and doing things that they don't like, and this is you. First of all, I want you to feel really validated right now, because this is not just you. This is, I mean, what you're talking about here, Amanda, is a systemic problem, issue, thing that parents encounter.
Yes.
And we're probably not going to change the system overnight. And so what have been like a couple of things that you have picked up along the way that you share with parents?
Well, so that's a really great question. One thing that I have done, and I think because a lot of times parents get just beaten down in these meetings, I think unfortunately in a lot of other spaces they're too timid to maybe ask for changes. So, for example, an issue that we were having for a long time was getting my son to be able to attend Hebrew school, because that was considered another demand. And we want him to, have a love and knowledge base of his Jewish culture and religion. So in the last year, it just didn't seem like it was going to work out. Luckily, our synagogue had a sensory room, so they were, certainly very neuroaffirming, but he was essentially spending more time in there than in the classroom and not really learning anything. So when it came to the point of if I was going to sign him up again, I was very much thinking I wasn't going to. And luckily, the religious school director said, how can we work with you? So from there, I started polling different parents about what would a program look like that would be a way for your kids to access like religious school education. And so a lot of different responses came back, including like having a shortened day, having a movement break at the beginning, having teachers with special ed backgrounds do it, having the Hebrew school lessons be based upon the kids' interests themselves. And to be clear, all of these modifications would be good for neurotypical children as well. It's just that in the case of the neurodivergent kids, I feel like the runway of tolerance is much shorter. So in my case, and this is not for everyone, when I'm seeing a gap, I just think to myself, what can we do to fill this gap, or like, how can things be modified so there's more access and participation?
And what I hear you saying too is don't wait for somebody else to have the answer. You might not, you might not have all the answers, but you've got a starting point and you've got a question. Ask the question.
And your kid, like you said, I am not an expert, like you are in your field, but like you are an expert on your own child, and what are the pain points for them to be able to participate in something. So in the case of my kiddo, it was just too long, and like the whole idea of going to school on a weekend is just like, such a high level demand. So I literally just asked him, what could we do to make this okay for you to attend? And so now he likes to say, he's the whole reason this program got started. So really it's all about him. And I'm happy for that, bragging right to go to him. So now he can attend Hebrew school.
Well, it's interesting. So speaking up, knowing that you're the expert, talking to your kid about what would make this better for you. Now, we're not going to do this with 3-year-olds, okay? Because they don't know.
Right. Yeah.
But we can do it with anybody who's, 8, some 7-year-olds, but anybody who's above 8 sometimes can engage in this kind of conversation. Particularly when, as I suspect you did, we're coming to them with like, hey, bud, this is something I really want for you.
Yeah.
How can we make this better? I'm not trying to piss you off. I'm not trying to put you in a difficult spot. So I think, and what I hear when I hear parents talk to their kids like that is they're treating their children like human beings.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the thing with, pathological demand avoidance, or, it's all about autonomy. It's about having a seat at the table in the decision-making process. And I think it's a very hard thing because one, a lot of the majority of the parenting techniques out there, like you just have that normal hierarchy relationship. Plus you add in grandparents who, maybe were raised in the 50s or 60s, and like, that's just not a thing, So I think it's definitely like a total mind shift, to have them have an opinion and be a part of the discussion. But even if, as you said, they're not old enough maybe to express it, you can also kind of notice things yourself, like sensory things with clothes or something. Like if they don't want to wear, they're throwing off certain pants or something, kind of asking yourself like, well, what's that about? Is it like, the texture? Is there a tag? Like, what can we investigate? So even if they don't have, the full vocabulary to tell you, there are certain like signals that you can pick up on.
I was just coaching a family the other day whose child is old enough in theory to go and brush their teeth after dinner and doesn't. And
toothbrushing is such a problem in this community. Oh my God.
Toothbrushing is a real thing, guys. It's, and I just, I'll take this opportunity because here we are. For kids, for neurodivergent kids in particular, toothbrushing is a problem for a couple of different reasons. The first one is lots of neurodivergent kids are using their vision to modulate their sensory experience. In other words, they're inspecting everything very closely to make sure it's safe. Now think about the inside of your mouth. You cannot see in there. So number one, if we've got a visual, like somebody who's very vigilant visually, toothbrushing is pretty much off the table in terms of independent doing it. Then if we've got actual other sensory sensitivities, now we're really talking about that. In the meantime, you might touch something in there and gag, and that's terrible also. So and it's a thing that your parents ask you to do every single day, and they won't stop. So for somebody who is a PDA-er, and by the way, I just want to throw in here, pervasive drive for autonomy is the other way we fill in that acronym. If that's you, then toothbrushing is like the hill you're going to die on. So that's anyway, but I was saying to go back to the original point, which was like, why don't we want to brush their teeth? It's not because kids are being bad. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
many steps away from
right.
usually
Yeah.
from where we are. And so
Oh
getting
yeah, totally. You
kids.
have to figure it out. I mean, and this is a battle, like, I'm going through and trying to figure out, like different options of brushes and whatever, and magic timers and rewards. And I mean, it's definitely pervasive in the community. So if you have a kid that, if you can only get them to do it once a day, like that's all right. I mean, if it's too hard and you don't want to have this knockdown drag out, then just say, we're in a season where it's going to be once a day, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Amanda, if people want to learn more about your community so that they can have these kinds of conversations, what do they do?
Yeah, so you can go to neurospicegirls.net is our website, which lists all of our events coming up. We have so much going on in January, from a vision board creation party at the beginning of the year to a rage room visit to get out all that post-holiday stress, which is going to be awesome, to a webinar on the dynamics of raising a neurodivergent child and the impact on self-identity and your partner relationship, which is such a huge piece that I feel like oftentimes gets thrown to the wayside. So lots of great stuff. We also have our private Facebook group. So those are great ways to get involved.
Fantastic. We will link to all of that in the show notes. And Amanda Levin, thank you.
Thank you so much.